Well, good morning, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get our meeting started. We will call the Executive Committee meeting of May 14th, 2026 to order. Clerk, please take the roll.
Good morning, members. If you can please make your selections on the tablet. Chair, we have a quorum with 5 members present and 2 members absent.
Thank you. Let's move to non-agenda public comment. This provides 2 minutes for anybody who'd like to comment on something that is not on today's agenda, but is within the purview of the committee. Clerk, do we have any non-agenda public comment?
We have no public comments.
Okay. Next is approval of the minutes of the April 9th, 2026 meeting of the Executive Committee. Clerk, do we have any public comment on the minutes?
We have no public comments, Chair.
All right. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes? We have a motion from Vice Chair Goebel that I am happy to give the second to Director Dillard. Any discussion on the minutes? Seeing none, we have a motion and a second to approve the minutes. Clerk, please take the vote.
Members, if you can please make the selections on your tablets. Chair, the motion passes with 5 members voting yes and 2 members absent.
Thank you. Let's move on to our discussion items. Item 4 is a discussion of the fiscal year 2027 operating budget, and we're going to get a presentation from Gordon Meyer.
Good morning, Gordon Meyer, Manager of Financial Planning. So this morning I'm going to present an updated look at our FY27 operating budget. So to give a brief overview, we had presented a preliminary draft of the FY27 operating budget to the Executive Committee on April 9th last month. Since then, we've continued to refine our expense and revenue assumptions. Some of the major changes since the last draft were that the planning department finalized the service levels. And so we ran those final service level projections through our budget calculations, and those are reflected in this draft. We also reflected the decision at the board last month to increase fares. And then we also made other expense and revenue adjustments, particularly in energy and some of the other categories as well, based on new information. So in this meeting, we'll briefly discuss the changes from the prior draft, and then we'll also have a discussion where we'll be seeking guidance on the expense assumptions for non-represented personnel. That discussion was started at the last meeting. A side note there is that the current draft that we'll be looking at does reflect the current staff recommendation, which includes 0% growth year over year for the non-represented personnel category. So in total, we'll be looking at 3 options at the end of the presentation, and then we'll ultimately take the feedback from this meeting and reflect that in the presentation that we take to the full board next week. And then side note on personnel is that we're also still evaluating our request from operations to add additional construction safety flag persons. That will be presented in the final June round of meetings. And then in terms of non-personnel assumptions, we're not anticipating any additional changes from what we're presenting today. However, because we do have a couple more weeks to finalize this draft, if we receive new information that would lead to a material change in the budget, we will reflect that and then report back in June. So getting into the changes from the prior draft. So one of the major changes was in passenger revenue. And before we look at the updated forecast for that, did want to mention that we saw very favorable results in March. Specifically, we saw a 7% year over year growth in revenue. And March is particularly significant because it's the first month where we were not anticipating an impact from the fare enforcement when you look at it on a year over year basis, because the fare enforcement started in February of last year. So that can all be attributed to ridership. It was spot on with the preliminary ridership estimate that was provided by the planning department as well, which also showed 7% system-wide ridership growth. So going back to the last meeting, we had presented a baseline passenger revenue projection with no impact from the fare study because we didn't have a decision on that yet. That baseline projection was based on a ridership estimate of 83.1 million passengers. That represented a 2.8% growth assumption over the current FY26 amended budget. It was essentially assuming a rebound in trolley ridership and then a little bit of continued growth on the fixed route bus side. It was also based on an average fare assumption of $1. So that is the same as the FY26 amended forecast, did not include any impact from the fare increase. So now, based on the board decision in relation to the fare study, we took the projected impact from the fare increase and then we applied that to the baseline. For the fare study, the fare increase, we are assuming in this projection a start date of September 1st. Did receive notification yesterday that start date's being pushed to October. So this will change a little bit in the June draft. However, in this projection, we did revise the passenger revenue forecast up to 91 million in total. So that was an $8 million increase over that baseline that was presented at the last meeting. In this forecast, the ridership would be estimated at 81.5 million passengers, which is lower than the baseline because we do expect to lose some ridership based on those elasticity calculations. So the new ridership target in this draft would represent just under a 1% increase in year-over-year ridership gains. And then due to the fare increase, we would expect to see the average fare grow to $1.12. So you can see visually what that looks like. July and August are just a little bit higher than the FY26 amended budget, which is the blue line, because there's just a assumed increase in ridership. And then it jumps up considerably in September based on the fare increase and then stays higher. As mentioned, that'll be pushed out to October. So we will expect the overall forecast to come down a little bit because we'll only have 9 months with the fare increase versus 10 in this projection. All right, so we also had some changes within subsidy revenue. The first was in the Transnet operating revenue. So that's a reimbursement we received from Sandag for operating the bus rapid transit and mid-coast services. Basically, we updated those projections with the final service levels for FY27. And after doing that, we brought down the forecast by 472,000 from the prior draft, mostly due to the changes in the mid-coast billing rate. We also made some changes to the projection for SB 125 Transit and Intercity Rail Capital Program, or TIRCP. On this line, we updated the reimbursement amounts for the Security, Iris Rapid, Route 910, and trolley service based on the final service level projections, as well as our updated energy costs as well. Most significantly for SB 125 is we're reducing the amount that we need to balance our structural deficit by 7.1 million. And that is attributed to the fare increase. Because the fare increase is reducing our structural deficit, we need to use less SB 125 to balance our budget in FY27. So net reduction of 8 million from the prior draft, and we're now projecting to use just over 42 million in FY27. So here is the updated revenue summary. So this is the current draft for FY27. You can see our operating revenues in total are now projected at just under 125 million. That's growth of 8.9%. Our subsidy revenue is projected at 356 million. And then overall, our revenues in the FY27 operating budget are projected at 480 million in this draft, which represents growth of 2%. So that covers the revenues. Moving on to our service level and expense changes. So on the service level side, we presented preliminary estimates at the last meeting. Now we have the final projection for scheduled statistics for service. So we'll go through those. First is rail. At the last meeting, we had projected a 1.3% increase in car revenue miles. That's versus a train revenue mile, which is includes 3 cars. Make it as confusing as possible. But the we're now projecting a 2.6% decrease in car miles because we plan on running 2-car trains during certain non-peak times on certain lines. So the planning department went through, looked at our existing demand on the trolley lines and identified certain times where it would be possible to run 2-car trains instead of 3-car trains. No reduction to train hours, so there's no reduction to operator hours. This is just a reduction in the car or the train size. And by doing that, we do expect to have some savings in both the electricity costs as well as revenue vehicle parts as well. On the fixed route bus side, we had initially projected a 2.7% decrease. Little tightening there, we're now projecting a 2.4% decrease. And then on the paratransit side, no change from the prior draft. That's a demand-based service, so you can't schedule that. And we're still projecting a 9.1% increase in the billable service for that operation. So moving on to the actual expense changes within the different categories. So first is purchase transportation. That is our contracted bus costs. So here we took the final projected service schedules and ran those through our budget calculations. After doing that for all the different services, we came up with a net decrease of $310,000 from the prior draft. Within outside services, we had some unfortunate news. We got a call from the maintenance department, and they're currently in procurement for the new contract for engine and transmission overhauls. And based on the initial bids, those per unit costs are increasing by almost 50%. So we reflected that in this budget draft, and we increased just that line item alone by $942,000. Within materials and supplies, we've removed $600,000 for the ticket vending machine credit card module upgrade project. So this was a fare system project that we're removing from the budget, essentially to achieve some cost savings. And then we were also able to reduce the budget for revenue vehicle parts for the light rail vehicles or trolleys by $310,000. That's our estimate from running the 2-car trains instead of the 3-car trains. So overall, materials and supplies coming down $807,000 from the prior draft. And then within energy, we continue to receive good news. So on the compressed natural gas side, which powers the vast majority of our bus fleet, we were able to bring the forecast down by $548,000 from the prior draft. And due to 2 reasons. The first is we pulled the most recent Department of Energy forecast and the most recent NYMEX futures for CNG as well. Both of those came down by an average of almost 7% from the prior draft. So we reduced the commodity rate forecast. And then we also brought down the forecasted consumption a little bit as well, based on the final service levels and the current trend that we're seeing right now based on our current usage. On the electricity side, we did bring the rate up by a couple cents from the last forecast. However, we were able to reflect additional savings due to running the 2-car train. So the electricity is dispersed between all the cars in the train. So when you reduce it to 2, you not only have savings on weight, but also you're using less electricity from 2-car trains. So we reflected that as well. So overall, energy costs came down $746,000 from the prior draft. Within risk management, we're increasing the budget for the claim payouts by $500,000 versus the last draft. And that's based on an updated timeline for the projected claims. So based on what we're seeing today, we expect FY26, so the current fiscal year, we expect to come in favorable. And then so we're shifting some of that budget to FY27. Overall, we're projecting to use less than originally anticipated from the MTS insurance reserve versus the original plan. It's just really a timing shift on that line. So in total, we have all these changes in the different categories, but in total, expenses decreased by $504,000 from the prior draft. And then as mentioned, personnel is really the main pending item at this point. And then as we before we move on to the next slides, the current draft does reflect the current staff recommendation for the zero growth in non-union personnel expenses. So here's what the revised expenses look like in the current draft. So in this draft, personnel expenses are forecasted at 206 million. That's an increase of 2.8 million or 1.4% versus FY26. Reminder here, this isn't in the presentation, but a large reason for that low overall increase in personnel is that change to the San Diego Transit actuarial contribution for the self-funded pension plan as well. And then the other categories we talked about already in detail. So now in this draft, expenses are projected at 480 million. That's an increase of 9.3 million or 2% over the current FY26 amended budget. So here you can see the revised draft of the operating budget, including all the revenues and expenses, and a look at our structural deficit. So our recurring revenues are now projected at 388 million. Our expenses are projected at 480 million. So that leaves us with a structural deficit, which is our recurring revenues minus our expenses, of 92 million. So that is about an $8 million reduction from what we presented at the last meeting, and that can almost all be attributed to the increase in fares. Now, in order to get to our overall operating budget, we need to include the non-recurring items. So we have the reserves activity of 93,000, the 50 million that's being shifted from the capital budget to the operating budget, and then the SB 125 funding, which is non-recurring in nature. So with those included, we do have a balanced budget in this draft for FY27. All right, so that covers the changes from the last meeting. So now we're going to move on to the discussion on personnel and specifically just the non-represented or non-union personnel category. So this slide you saw at the last meeting, but did want to refresh everyone on which employees this includes. So it does include the administration and the management staff across each of the operations within MTS. So on the bus operations side, that includes all the frontline supervisors, maintenance supervisors, training staff, safety staff, customer support, and then the management and administration for that service as well. On the rail side, once again, that includes all of the frontline supervisors, maintenance supervisors for all the maintenance departments. So that's the vehicle maintenance, facilities, track maintenance, MOW, the security supervisors, all the training staff, safety staff, passenger support representatives, and then the management and administration for those services as well. And then it also includes your typical administration departments that support the operations. So that includes our HR department, IT, marketing, planning, legal, finance, and procurement. It includes all the staff and management staff. And so, as mentioned, the current staff recommendation is to achieve zero expense growth for the non-represented employee category in FY27. So that's 0% growth in the personnel category as a whole. So that includes wages, healthcare, and all the other fringe benefits as well. And in order to achieve that would require multiple initiatives. And essentially what we're asking for here is for approval of a budget target that the CEO would then manage to achieve that target. So in addition to the staff proposal, at the last meeting, there were several counter proposals that were introduced as well. So we'll go through each of those. And then before we start looking at the details of those, I do want to mention that each of these is being compared to a 4% merit baseline each year. So that way we can compare them apples to apples. And it also, we're only asking for guidance on what to assume for FY27. So in FY28 and beyond, each of these proposals assumes a return to 4% merit increases. So what we're really analyzing is the impact of just the decision for FY27. So getting into the details of these, so the first counter proposal was made by board member Dillard, and this proposal included Instead of paying a 4% merit increase in FY27, there would be a 4% one-time bonus paid to employees who make less than $200,000 a year. And because it's a bonus, it would not be pension eligible. So you would see savings on the pension side. It would be paid out in November around Thanksgiving. And then importantly too, the 4% bonus payment would not be included in future salary increase calculations. So looking to FY28, if you were to do a 4% increase, it would be applied to that pre 4% bonus amount in FY27. And so really the savings from this is coming from that year of not having an increase. And so in terms of the projected cost impact of this proposal in FY27, you'd save about $320,000 versus a 4% merit pool. And the savings in FY27 is lower because the agency is still paying the 4%. It's just as a one-time bonus. And so the savings here really come in year 2 through 5. Where you would save approximately $2 million per year off of the structural deficit from having that FY28 increase only be applied to the pre-bonus amount. Now, in terms of comparing to the current staff recommendation, we would need to add $2.6 million to the current FY27 draft for FY27. And then as mentioned, the savings would really be in those later years. Some of the potential impacts is that market salaries will continue to grow. So whenever we get out of step with that, we can see impacts. Employee retention could be challenging due to that year without an increase. And then with this plan, you would see compression between the represented and non-represented groups, particularly because all of the represented groups are receiving 4% increases in FY27. And so if you see a tightening of those, then you can run into issues where there might not be as much motivation to become a supervisor. And then generally that has led to the need to give additional increases to frontline supervisors as well. Moving on to the next counter proposal. So this was introduced by Vice Chair Goebel, and this was fairly straightforward in that instead of a 4% merit pool for FY27, it would be reduced to a 3% merit pool. So in terms of the projected cost impact here, we'd be expected to save about $500,000 in FY27 versus a 4% merit pool. And then you would be expected to see similar savings in years 2 through 5 with an approximate $500,000 reduction to the structural deficit. For a 5-year compounded savings figure of $2.8 million. And with all the others, this would be a 3% merit pool in FY27, and then it assumes back to a 4% in FY28 through FY31 for comparison's sake. So it's really the compounding impact that we're talking about in savings. Comparing this to the current staff recommendation, we would need to add $2.4 million to the FY27 budget if we were to select this option. Now, the table at the bottom compares all of the 5-year cost and annual cost versus the 4% merit baseline. So the top line there is the projected cost if we were to do a 4% increase each year. And then the alternatives below that. So a 4% merit baseline over 5 years would be projected to cost $323 million. The current staff proposal would be projected to cost $308 million. So that's savings of about $15 million over 5 years. The board member Dillard proposal would be projected to cost $314 million. That would be savings of approximately $9.4 million versus that 4% baseline. And then the Vice Chair Goebel proposal would be expected to cost $320 million over 5 years. And that would be about $2.8 million in savings over those 5 years. All right, so last slide, just on next steps. So we will take the guidance that we received today and reflect that in the draft that goes to the full board next week. In that meeting, we're going to do the full presentation where we cover all of the revenue and expense assumptions. And then we'll take board feedback. And then after that meeting, we'll finalize all of our remaining assumptions, prepare the full budget book, update our 5-year forecast with all of our final assumptions, and then ultimately present that to the executive committee on June 11th, and then hold the public hearing at June 18th, where we would ask for approval. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions or start the discussion.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Meyer. Clerk, do we have any public comment on this item?
We have no public comments, Chair.
All right. With that, we will open committee member discussion on this item, and we'll begin with Board Member Dillard.
Good morning. Thank you for the presentation. I have a question about page, I thought it was page, hold on. Well, we could go to page 13. I thought it was page 12, though, that I had a question. On my proposal, so page 12, on my proposal, I need to clarify. When I said 200,000, you said under, the people under 200,000. And I meant the people over 200,000. So I don't know if my proposal doesn't say that, but.
What we saw on your proposal originally was that you didn't want anyone making more than 200,000 to get a bonus.
No,
So you want people making over 200,000 to get the bonus, but nobody else.
no. What I was saying is to leave the people under 200,000 to the normal pay. But over 200,000, instead of giving those, that group pay increases, normal pay increases, the 4%, just give them a bonus of 4% and leave the pay at the same level that they have. And also too, this was figured into like a 4-year period. And I would feel more comfortable that if that is accepted, that we just try it out for 1 year and see how we do for 1 year. I wouldn't want to put it on a 4-year calendar because I don't think that necessarily would be fair. And so I would just like to make the offer for 1 year and have us reassess. So those two changes. The other thing is that on page 13, these numbers, they feel somehow not right to me. So I'm not sure why we had to bring in the non-union, because on my proposal, I said non-union. So I don't know why non-union is in this breakdown. That's one thing. And also too, I'm wondering if we should clarify, and I'm, maybe not understanding, are you using that 4% for the entire next 4 years? I'm just trying to get a clarification.
Yeah, so what's being discussed here is just the decision on FY27, and then for FY28 through FY31, it assumes a return to a 4% merit increase. And that's not to suggest that that's what's going to be recommended for the next 4 years. It's just for comparison's sake of comparing to like a typical year. Because if we were to make additional assumptions in the out years here about what's going to happen in the future, it's going to make it even more confusing to compare. But what's in this proposal is really, it's the 4%. This was all employees who make less than 200,000 receiving the 4% bonus instead of the merit increase. And that's where most of the savings comes from in the out years. So if we do change that to everyone who makes under 200,000 gets the normal 4% merit increase, and then we'll only have the savings from the people who make over 200,000 getting paid as a bonus, the savings is going to be very minimal because it's only 12 people in the agency
Okay.
who make over 200,000.
Okay, so then it should probably be everybody in order to make this effective for 1 year with the true savings. So let me just ask, are we, since the unions are on here as a comparison,
Just to,
go ahead.
sorry, I just want to, the union figures aren't included in any of the dollar figures. The only place a union is mentioned is just the bottom sentence there. And it's just saying, so based on the current collective bargaining agreements, those are all including 4% increases. Generally, we like to keep the non-union and union wage increases comparable. And so that's why part of why the 4% merit increase was used as the baseline that we're comparing to.
Well,
But it's not included in like any of these tables.
Okay, so then isn't this line irrelevant? I mean, why do we even have it?
The bottom
We
line?
only included it because we wanted to reassure the board after some comments at the last board meeting, or not the last board meeting, the last EC meeting, that we were not touching what's in the collective bargaining agreements. The collective bargaining agreements will stand with their 4% merit increase in FY27.
Well, the reason why I bring this up is because, I'm challenged about it being there, first of all, and then secondly, I don't feel like it's a fair comparison because there's no breakdown on the comparison of their healthcare benefits compared to staff's healthcare benefits. And so I just would like further clarification on that because it makes it look bad, like that's our highest expense is our unions. So I'm just going back to my proposal, I specifically said non-union. So I'm just, I'm bothered by the fact that it's on there. And the contributions that the unions make compared to the staff is significantly different. It's not a slightly different or modestly different. It's very different. And it's, the union workers are the ones that are risking their lives. It's a more dangerous job to, work on the machines and the ones that are out in the yard, the ones that face the public. And so I'm just, needing some clarification on, because maybe the board should see those differences for benefits for the unions, you know, since it's on here, compared to staff. I would see that as being fair, to have that comparison as well. And so I would like to see what the numbers would be if we just included all of the staff, first of all, and if we could get for the board members to see the difference in the benefit packages for staff versus unions. That would be my ask.
Okay. Did you, anything else that you wanted to add to that or?
No, not right now.
Okay.
I think that I didn't understand why we were using the 4% as an average for the next 4 years, because we don't know what's going to happen in 4 years. It could be less, you know? And so, you know, I don't know why we had to use that. I think 26, 27 would have been good enough, because that was all I was asking for initially, was 1 year to reassess. But since the unions were brought on page 13, I think it's only fair that we consider them appropriately if we're going to use them on this slide.
Okay. Thank you, Director Dillard. Further board conversation on this item. Let's go to Director Fernandez.
Thank you. I'm just now even more unclear on what Director Dillard's original motion was. I remember her proposing it. I remember us asking her to formalize it, put it into print, and around mid-April, I believe I received an email with that. I just want to know that the email that I received mid-April with her proposal written out, were those her exact words or was that staff interpretation?
That was exactly what I was forwarded from Board Member Dillard. And in your attachment C was an updated version of it that she forwarded to myself and the chair 3 weeks ago, something. I don't remember exactly how long ago that was, but we included that so that you could see what she had proposed. And she clarified that the only thing she changed was the words non-represented to non-union.
And so we're not necessarily being asked to take an action today as far as selecting any of the proposals, or?
We are. We're being asked to make a recommendation to the full board. Next week at the board meeting, we're going to be considering the budget for FY27. And one of the things that, if we can come to an agreement today, we'll be recommending to the board to include in that budget assumption one of these pay structures. So that's our mission today, if we can arrive at an agreement.
I mean, I believe it to be such an important decision that we should either narrow it down to maybe 2 or forward all of them to the board of directors. As much as I would like to select just one, that's my thought.
Director Moreno.
Sorry, I just have a point of clarification. We need to approve the budget by June 30th, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so we still have 2 more board meetings for us to decide.
Yeah.
It's going down to the wire, I get it, but just for the sake of, and 1 more executive meeting in June, correct?
Correct.
Okay, that was my point of clarification that I needed.
Director Dillard.
So can I make a motion to have us not make a decision today, and so that we can number one, disclose the information that I requested. I like to just look at a 1 or 2 year comparison versus, going all the way to 3031. And to bring to the executive committee the breakdown for the difference between staff and union workers on benefits. So we can at least be clear what's happening here with the benefits, especially if we're going to show that the costs for workers, for the union workers, are more, because usually benefits are better. And I know better that the union workers don't have as good of a benefit package. And I'm not saying, and I'm not giving an argument to that, but I think that the board members should know what it is. What is it? So that's my motion, that we hold off and ask for additional clarification. And if we do make it for 2 years instead of 4, can we have a clarification using a 4% merit increase and just using the full amount of staff receiving a one-time bonus, and see how the overall annual fiscal year is affected with that for 1 year, or at best 2 years.
So in your proposal in the attachment C, you mentioned structural cost control, and you talked about the 5-year $4 million savings.
Mm-hmm.
So you would just like us to pare it down to just this year's savings?
Well, we could do 2 years, but I really want, reserve the right to ask that we review it after 1 year and see what happened, because I don't want it to just go on. And I think that a 4-year period is too long for that to happen. And I don't see it as fair at all. I just want to see if it will help with the overall fiscal dollar amount. Like where would we be if we did that for 1 year? Because it wouldn't be compounded for that year, and that could make a big difference. And if it looks like we made a significant deduction that affects the overall budget, then we can talk about it and see if we want to do it for the next year.
Just a couple of clarifications, because I think that while the chart on page 13 gives us, an idea of if, it's a scenario that what things would look like if it went out over 5 years. To be clear, the only thing that we're going to be voting on in this budget is the staff salaries for unrepresented employees as it relates to unrepresented. We're just going to be doing this coming year. We're not considering a decision on a 2-year package or a 3-year package. That's not on the table. All we're going to be doing is determining staff, unrepresented staff pay for FY27, the coming year. Now, based on whether or not things are paid out in bonuses
Mhm.
or are based out or are paid out in salary,
Mhm.
that affects what the total cost of the organization would be in FY28 if we were to then do a standard, in this case,
So
4%
this couldn't be
raise.
effective for 27 then at all?
This is only going to be, well, this is only going to be effective for FY27. So July 1st of this year to June 30th of next year. That's the time period that we're contemplating. If you want to, I mean, because we don't know what we're going to do next year,
Mhm.
I mean, we'll all be back here again this time in a year, kind of figuring out FY28, but we don't know what we're going to decide, right?
Mhm.
So if we assume for the sake of argument that it would be, and it may not be, but if we assume because we got to assume something just to look at what it could be for 2 years. If we assume for the sake of argument that it's a 4% across the board increase in salary for FY28,
Mhm.
you could see the 2-year impact on this chart by just adding up what's in the projection for FY27. Those are the packages we're discussing.
Except for that was used with just the staff under 200,000. Is that correct?
So that was based on a presumption that what you had put forward, and maybe there was a misunderstanding somewhere along the way, but that was based on the presumption that what you had put forward was, well,
Only staff under
Only staff under.
200,000 a year would get a. I didn't speak.
yeah.
And
right.
I would like for that to be, since that was interpreted that way, I want that change to be 100% of the staff. Because I don't think that makes sense to not include the 200,000 and over, especially since it's only a smaller amount anyway, that could change these numbers.
Okay, so then what you would be proposing is, well, okay, tell me what it is. What is it that you would be proposing?
Instead of including just the staff under 200,000, just include the entire staff.
Okay, include the entire staff for, are you talking
The
about?
bonuses, for the bonuses.
And a 4% bonus.
Yes.
So basically all unrepresented, under your proposal, all unrepresented staff, regardless of what they make, would get a 4%
Bonus.
non-pensionable bonus.
Right.
Okay.
Non-pensionable.
Okay. And then the upshot of that would be then on the projection for FY27, where it says that the cost would be 59.9. That would go up ever so slightly, I think, because you'd have the 12 people who make over $200,000 also get that bonus. That's not a big number. It'd be a slight increase. So I don't know what it'd be, but probably something like 60 then instead of 59.9. Okay. Understood. Other comments from the board?
Okay.
Vice Chair Gobel.
Okay. So I hear there's a motion to table this. I don't know if you want to rethink that, but I'm hearing the proposal is all unrepresented employees get a non-pensionable bonus of 4%. And we're just talking FY27. After FY28, that's for another decision, another year, correct? So far, so good? Okay. The concern I have with that is now we're treating groups differently. And what it means is for all of these line workers, there's a slide, it might be slide 12 that listed all the unrepresented. There you go. For all the frontline supervisors, maintenance supervisors, training, safety, all these people, it essentially delays their pensionable maximum by a year. Are you following me? If I don't give them a raise, their pensionable pay doesn't increase. We've taken it off and made it a bonus. So when they go to retire, they have, I'm just going to say 4% less of their pensionable pay, while the represented employees don't face that same condition. So I see an imbalance there, that it's not really fair to unrepresented employees to hinder their retirement earnings and things. So I just, boy, if you feel 4%, just make it a 4%, just like the unions, and make it a merit increase. And now everybody's treated the same.
Is that a motion?
Well, she has a motion, so I'll make that a substitute motion.
Okay. So you have a substitute motion to essentially do the 4%
Just get a
merit
4%
increase
merit
for unrepresented employees,
employees.
matching the 4% that the unions are receiving.
Agreed.
Okay, I'll second the motion
And this is a recommendation to the board.
as a recommendation to the board. And let's go back to Director Dillard.
This is not unfair. It's not unfair because we can't do it. We couldn't do it if we wanted to do it, because all of the unions are in a contract, except for one right now. But once you go into a contract, you can't do anything. And I don't know who's going to be up for a contract in 2028. I don't keep track of that, but so I don't see it as unfair. It's not unfair. The original reason why I came to this in the first place is because we did raise the rates for our passes to use the trolley and use the buses. And I approved that because it's been 19 years. And so it's not an unfair assumption that we shouldn't raise the rates at this time. I agreed with that, even though we had some colleagues that didn't agree with that. But in order to show that we are all sharing in if you don't ride the trolley or you don't ride the bus, with all due respect, you're in another bubble, because you don't see those people that have to use public transportation. It's not a choice for them. They have to use it. They either don't have a car or they have to share a car, and it doesn't work for them. And there's a lot of good people that ride our service, and this sector is to serve our people. And with us not making any sacrifice in any other place is unfair if we are going to ask our ridership for more, which, by the way, is the most disadvantaged community. We have over 60% of those people that are riding that are disadvantaged. And if you've never been disadvantaged, you probably can't see that. And so you could care less. So I don't see it. I see it as unfair as, we're just going to ask the most disadvantaged, the most people that are struggling every day to put food on the table and pay their rent or whatever, their expenses may be, take care of their children, et cetera, and then do nothing about the people who are helping to serve those people. I don't see it as unfair to ask this. And these are, again, we talked about this before, Chair, about the hard decisions. Now, I understand this is a hard decision, but I'm only asking for 1 year. I'm not asking for 5 years, to be fair. And so I don't think this is unfair at all. If we're going to ask our ridership to do something, we should show them that we are also doing something personally. So that's, I won't support that amendment to my motion, because that in itself is unfair.
Thank you, Director Dillard. And I share your desire to stand up for our riders and to try to make transit use as affordable and efficient and accessible as possible. We have an obligation to do that. And I think every member on this board shares that desire to do that. And I'm also confident that every member of our staff shares the desire to do that. Reducing or, removing a year of pensionable salary from our unrepresented employees is going to have no or a negligible impact on our riders one way or the other, but it will impact those employees. And those employees are doing really good work for our riders. And I'll give you an example of that. We are a leader in transit-oriented development. We are actively building affordable housing near transit so that people who have the least can get an apartment that they can afford and get transportation that they can afford. That's good stuff that we're doing there. And it takes a lot of skill and experience and expertise in our unrepresented staff to be able to make that happen. And they're doing that. And I want to keep the folks that are doing that. And I want them to feel appreciated and have every incentive to continue to stay with the organization. So I think giving our unrepresented staff the same deal that we're giving our represented staff, I don't think that's any reflection at all on our represented staff. I think everybody here has really stood up for our unions. Everybody here wants to make sure that our represented staff has a good deal. We've gone above and beyond to make sure that our represented staff are paid fairly, I think, because we care. I think and we should do that. So good. But I also think giving the same thing to our unrepresented staff is fine. And then you've got unrepresented staff and represented staff who feel valued, motivated, and interested in coming to work every day to make transit affordable, accessible, and efficient for the riders who desperately need it. So I'm going to go ahead and I seconded the motion, so I support it and I stand by it. Let's go to, I see you on the light, but let's go to Director Moreno and then we'll go back to you, Director Dillard.
Thank you. And thank you for bringing this forward. I last meeting stated that I was uncomfortable with taking away the responsibility that we've given our executive director to manage staff. Part of that, I think, includes bonuses. Obviously, that's not where we are today. We have two proposals essentially, but I'm trying to get to the bottom of it, and it's not clear to me. Goebel's, what do we call each other? Vice Chair Goebel's proposal is simply 1 year, 4% across the board. That is correct, right? So I'm trying to understand how is that different from, and I don't disagree with Board Member Dillard. What staff brought you is not exactly what you asked. You didn't ask to see 5 years. You asked to see 1 year and how that 1 year would impact the budget. And if my reading is correct, it impacts the budget by about $3 million. That's the difference, right? We're in the, no? If we look at projected fiscal year 27, 4% merit baseline is 60. Staff proposal is 57. Board member Dillard is 59.9. What am I not
So
understanding?
that's like a $300,000.
That's a
difference.
$300,000 difference.
No, but she's changed her proposal to include all staff, not just people making
include-
less than 200,000. So
so
it would
that's-
actually be 60.2 million or close to it.
It would be about probably $200,000 savings in year one.
No, I don't.
It should be very close to the 60.2 million.
Okay.
Because you're essentially paying 4% to all non-represented employees, whether in a bonus or a wage. So those numbers would be identical.
Just to clarify for the record, because I don't know that if it's clear from staff presentation, and certainly finance staff, correct me if I'm wrong, but the reason that the 5-year projection was put in there was that that's the only way to demonstrate some of the savings from Board Member Dillard's original proposal, because there's not a significant savings in fiscal year 27. Where you see the savings is even if in the next years you don't continue her proposal. Like, so that's just saying in fiscal year 28, the board decides to revert back to some merit pool. And for just consistency, we're assuming every single one of the proposals on the board that in fiscal year 28 and beyond, the board reverts back to a 4% baseline. So what the 5-year projection is showing is that the proposed change on how you would structure fiscal year 27, if you only did that in 1 year and you continue, then you go back to the normal merit pool process, at the end of 5 years, you would have more savings because you would change the number you're doing the 4% on in the out years. And so that's why there's a 5-year projection showing, so that you could actually see some of the savings from the different proposals that you wouldn't see visually if we only gave you the fiscal year 27 numbers. Obviously, as we've already discussed, this board makes its budget decisions every year. So you can't make a proposal this year that would be a multi-year proposal that would bind future boards. Whoever the board is next year when we're making our fiscal year 28 budget, that's the board that has the discretion to make those budget decisions.
So why would you put the 5-year if that's not what she asked for?
It was to demonstrate that in her proposal at the end of 5 years, if you look at the total 5-year total.
No,
so-
I understand that. But if we can't bind future board members, why would you add that?
Well, because there is no change in the future. So the future is not saying that her 4% bonus would be continued every year. It's saying there would be one bonus in fiscal year 27. And then in fiscal year 28, for every single proposal on the board, you would revert back to, for our assumption, 4% merit pool. It could be a 3% merit pool. It could be a 2%. But for comparison purposes, if you just continue in fiscal year 28, where we go back to normal because you want to keep salaries like at market, that you would still have savings because of what you did in fiscal year 27. Those savings would carry through in the total budget number for that line item. So it was really just to demonstrate that there are savings from Board Member Dillard's proposal, but you wouldn't see them even if you do nothing different. If you don't change, so you don't have to realize that savings, the board doesn't have to make any decision next year that is less than just the 4% merit. If the board does something less next year, then there would be additional savings from that decision that board makes. But it was more to demonstrate, to not come in and say there's only a $300,000 savings from Board Member Dillard's proposal. There is additional savings in the out years if you look at it for 5 years. So that was the intent. It wasn't to do a 5-year binding proposal. It wasn't, those numbers don't include anything different for any of the proposals for those next 4 years. I don't know if I just made it more confusing.
I'm so
Yeah,
confused
okay.
that I will say that, and this, like, I love budgets, I love numbers, and I'm more confused than I was when Board Member Dillard made the original proposal. So I'm not prepared to support the motion on the floor at this moment because I think I understand it, and I actually want to hear a little bit more from board, not to put you on the spot, but I'd like to hear a little bit more from Board Member Dillard to see why would you support the motion that's on the floor. So I will end there.
So right now, what we're looking at is 2 proposals. One that is basically it's the difference between giving a 4% bonus or a 4%
Increase.
merit increase. So those are the two proposals. The one that there's been a motion and a second for is a 4% merit increase, which is the top line figure that you see there. The proposal for a bonus would also cost 60.2 million in the projected for fiscal year 27. So that's basically, those are the two proposals being discussed. No one's discussing anymore staff's proposal, which is actually the only one that, is basically keeps us even to what it was in fiscal year 26. And then Vice Chair Goebel has changed his from the 3% to the 4%. So we're really just looking at now, do you do a bonus or do you do a 4% merit increase?
And Director Dillard is advocating or has advocated for the 4% bonus for unrepresented employees next year. Vice Chair Goebel and I are of the perspective, well, if we're going to do 4%, let's just make it a regular raise. Director Dillard, let's go back to you.
So first I want to make clear that I deeply respect the staff and also feel very good about the staff and their accomplishments and their abilities to handle these very difficult challenges that we're having and experiencing. I'm not convinced that this would not help the overall fiscal budget by giving bonuses off the top, which I know do not directly include the total fiscal year compounded with all of these increased revenues for raises going the other way. And I'm, at an impasse here where I feel like there's, I'm not an accountant. So I don't know how this would really affect in 1 year, but I do want to make it clear that this is not new for organizations or companies to do this. We have a pretty large staff. And a lot of times when we're in even a $90 million budget, deficit, that's a lot of money. I mean, that's crazy to me to be in that much debt. And I know that for future projections, those are also at jeopardy. We don't know what we're going to get now versus what we would have normally expected. So there's that factor as well. And at the end of the day, I think that my whole mission is so that we can keep our employees employed. And I understand the method about kicking the can down the road, but how long can you do that? And if I was just talking to a room of accountants, it probably wouldn't be a very good conversation. So I feel like, the board members shouldn't just rubber stamp everything and trust that we won't go bankrupt when we're in debt $90 million. So again, I'm looking at the big picture. I'm not saying that everything is going to be solved with this, but I do think that we should do everything all at once. And I believe that the staff has been doing that. They've been coming through with things to try to reduce the budget. And so I just want to just make myself clear about how, I concur with you, Chair, about the staff. I don't think that, 1 year of receiving a bonus is going to cause our executives especially to just quit their jobs and go somewhere else. I don't follow that, because right now our economy is not good. And you know this, with jobs increasing, maybe, but if you want to stay in the public transit industry, that might cause you to have to move to another city or another state. And I'm not sure that, half the staff would be interested in doing that either, because it means taking their children out of school and all of the effects of moving, just moving across town. I mean, I remember when my son was a teenager, he gave me a really hard time about having to go to another high school. And it was what it was, but I'm telling you, if you have children, they give you quite a hard time to uproot them and move them someplace else. So I hear all the challenges and all of that. I'm gonna, let this go. If no one, I'm not going to support the amendment. So I don't know how I'm supposed to vote if since the amendment is attached to it, if it's going to be a separate vote for each. But if I'm not going to get the support from my colleagues, I'll just abstain, because I don't support us doing nothing. I'm done with it.
Thank you, Director Dillard. Let's go to Director Ela Rivera.
All right. Thank you. I think just to make sure I understand where we're at procedurally, substitute motion. So we're no longer considering Member Dillard's motion.
Technically, it's not a substitute motion because it was never a second to the original motion. So the original motion wasn't seconded. So this is the motion in the second.
Okay. And I'm just trying to make sure I'm kind of putting all the pieces together. I heard a little bit of, I think, a interest in seeing the full board discuss everything in front of us, to basically take this conversation to the full board. I think that's what Member Dillard was saying. Vice Chair Goebel, can you maybe help me understand why you think it's important to narrow it now and not take this to the full board for us to discuss?
Oh, I think we can take it to the full board. I just think we have to come out with a recommendation here. I'm not trying to narrow it.
So if that is the case, the recommendation is to bring it all forward with a recommendation from, so rather than just be typically we have a staff recommendation.
This is an executive committee recommendation to the board. This is what option we think we recommend.
Okay. Kind of with that little bit of housekeeping out of the way, I do want to say that I think it's important. I know that Member Dillard said it. I'm going to say it. Everyone who works here is doing valuable work, and that is super important. And this agency only works when the people who are working here every day, only because the people who are working every day do the work that they do, and all of that work is valuable. The part that is most compelling to me about what Member Dillard has put forward is and this is why I struggled last month, is asking folks who are really, really struggling, who depend on our system, to make sacrifices and pay more, and not doing something overt here that demonstrates that we see that, and the folks who can most absorb an impact here are making some sacrifice as well. I think the language that we're using is confusing the issue a little bit. I don't know that this is a union versus non-union thing in my mind, so much as executives and like everyday, like kind of frontline workers, the supervisors who look to those folks for their direction on a day-by-day basis. That's kind of how it plays out in my mind a little bit more. And then, I know you all work super hard. I want to I like really, really hard. I know that. The perception piece does matter though. And so at least to me, and I think to folks in the public as well, it's the idea of folks at the very top of the ladder getting more, and the everyday people who ride and depend on our system having to pay more. I think that's where it gets difficult from the conversation that I'm thinking about in my head when I'm thinking about the constituents who depend on the system. How can you ask me to pay more and your executives are getting more? That's the part of the conversation where for me, I get very uncomfortable. And I'm always happy to make the argument, because I believe it, that we need to pay people fairly and we need to pay them enough to live in the city where they work and all of those things. But at a certain point, when you're high enough up the ranks, the like just getting by arguments stops to land with folks who are truly just getting by. So I don't know if I sorted anything out with anything I said right here. I just wanted to kind of get that off my chest. I do think it's important for the board as a whole to kind of wrestle with this in the same way. I don't know that there's consensus. I haven't heard consensus yet on whether or not there's a recommendation here. Maybe there is, and I'm just not I'm not pulling it out of the conversation. But if there isn't, then I don't see the harm in just moving this forward as is and letting the full board do what we do with things. So I'll stop there. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Director Elo Rivera. Appreciate those comments. One element that I would point out is that the motion applies to all all unrepresented staff. So we're talking about either a non-pensionable bonus or a raise for everybody, including customer support staff, administrative staff, safety personnel, none of whom I think are in the category of making a ton of money. And really the difference between the two proposals from a price standpoint for FY27, I think they'd be essentially the same, 4% bonus versus 4% raise. So for FY27, that costing would be the same. The savings in the future years would come by the fact that your customer support staff, your admin staff, and all the other unrepresented employees, if they get a raise in FY 2028, it would not be added on to a raise that they got in FY 27 because that was a bonus and not a raise. And when it comes time to retire, they would not get a pension benefit for the work they did in FY 27. And I would prefer, look, if we're going to do the 4%, let's just do it as a 4% raise. But there's a variety of perspectives here. That's why we've got different folks at the table. I do think that the board, some board members, will look to what the executive committee did and recognize that we had a fairly lengthy discussion of it and be interested in where we land on this. We may not land in a consensus one way or the other, but if we do, that may be helpful to the board. In any event, any board member at any time can certainly have the same conversation at next week's board meeting that we're having here today. So I think we're ready to see where we are and vote on the motion that is in front of us, which is to give a 4% raise to our unrepresented staff in FY27.
Can I clarify that you mean a merit pool?
Well, actually, okay, let's ask Vice Chair Goebel, that's a 4% merit pool that would then be up to, well, you tell me.
It's typically a merit pool, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes, then that is my motion.
Okay,
So
so
for next week, though, could we strip off some of the stuff that we're not going to be considering? Well, I don't know. I said everything, so.
Well, what we could do is we could just say that there was a lengthy discussion at the executive committee. It narrowed down to whether to recommend a 4% merit pool or a 4% bonus for non-represented personnel.
Yeah, I don't think you need to go through my 3% proposal on a slide, but that would just seem to muddy the waters in a sense, but.
okay, so
Have at it.
to clarify, the motion is a 4% merit pool for unrepresented staff for FY27. That merit pool would be at the discretion of the CEO to allocate and administer as the CEO deems appropriate. Let's go back
Chair,
to.
we do, sorry, Chair, we do have the proposed recommendation on the screen. If you would like to take a look at it and go off of that, make sure that it looks good to go.
I think that captures it. Okay, we will go to Director Elo Rivera and then Director Fernandez.
I'm happy to wait. I just had it's a clarifying question and I'll.
Okay, Director Fernandez.
So we Vice Chair Goebel abandoned his 3% counter proposal. We're not considering the staff recommendation. We're just going with this one here. Mm-hmm.
As a recommendation, the board will be able to decide whatever it wants to decide.
And we're
week.
not going to provide that table with the 4 different options, right? We said we're going to strip away the stuff that we're not considering today.
Well, we could do it. I mean, if you have a different suggestion, if you would like to include elements of that table, we certainly can.
I would like to include that table.
Okay. Vice Chair Goebel is not proposing that line anymore. So if we okay, so we drop the Vice Chair Goebel,
yes,
and we'll include the other things that are on there.
Yes, I would like that.
Okay.
Well, can we clarify that? No, keep the 5 years as well.
Which is keep the 5 years as well. What do you mean the line at the top?
In the table? Do you want to see the whole table with showing the 5 years? Because a lot of the savings is compounding in the out years.
I want to see the 5 years. Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, because that seems to be the most challenging part is the 5 years. And just so everyone's clear again, we're just assuming a number in the out years for all the same proposals, the same number. We can use a different number, but we need to have a number in there to compare them all for the out years so you can see the compounding.
We can try to fix or modify the tables a little bit to the extent it's possible to clarify, make it a little bit more clear too, of like what those out years are.
And one more thing. So Director Dillard said that her proposal was interpreted erroneously. So those numbers up there are incorrect. Yes?
Yes, and we would not, I would believe we'd change the table and not say board member Dillard proposal, but bonus of 4%.
Okay.
So,
okay.
You know, and then we'd eliminate Vice Chair Goebel proposal.
Okay.
All right. Let's go back to Director Elo Rivera.
No, I might have just. Can we make sure, regardless of where we land, that we work with Member Dillard to ensure that what is presented to the full board is reflective of what she's trying to present to the board as an option?
That will happen. I will say that I think that there was a sincere and diligent effort to capture what Director Dillard intended to bring forward for this meeting, but we'll certainly continue that diligence and work with Director Dillard in advance of next week's meeting.
I appreciate that. I'm not doubting anyone's sincerity in the effort. I just want to make sure that when that conversation happens, it's done in a way where everyone, I mean, because I know a lot of time was put into this from everyone, Member Dillard, Vice Chair Goebel, staff, and it only seems fair that the time and effort that went into putting together, being thoughtful about what a proposal could look like, that it is reflective of what was actually intended to be put forward. So I appreciate that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Director Ela Rivera. Director Dillard.
Just a quick clarification. So the motion that I made will be restructured so it shows that I am proposing all staff.
So
Correct? I just want to make sure.
I think so. I think that I think that your proposal at this point is straightforward. Your proposal, correct me if I'm wrong, is a 4% non-pensionable bonus for all unrepresented employees for FY27.
And pensionable means that it's just a flat out bonus that doesn't affect the annual increase in each individual's salary. I just want to be clear on what a non-pensionable means.
Sure. So it means, I think, two things, and the finance folks can correct me if I get it wrong, but it means that instead of a raise, they'll get a check for 4% of what they were making this year. That will not be used in future salary calculations. So their FY28 raise, if there's a raise in FY28, would be based on what they made this year, not that bonus. And because bonuses don't count toward your pension,
right?
The bonus would not count toward the pension.
I just wanted to clarify, make sure that that I was going to have that change, and that it was going to be the way that I intended for the motion to be.
And does that capture the way you intended it?
I think so.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. All right. We've got a motion in front of us. The motion is on the screen to forward to the MTS Board of Directors, which will meet next week, the FY27 draft budget with the following revision. Include a table showing the comparison between the Executive Committee recommendation, the staff proposal, and a one-time bonus of 4% proposal for non-union employees. And that would be and then also forward to the board the Executive Committee recommendation for the proposal of a 4% merit pool for non-union employees for FY27 at the discretion of the CEO. Does that motion make sense to everybody? Everybody understand what we're voting on? Okay. Clerk, please take the vote.
Members, if you can please make the selections on your tablets. Chair, the motion passes with 5 members voting yes, 1 member voting no, and 1 member absent.
Thank you, Clerk. Thank you to my colleagues on the Executive Committee for the robust and thoughtful discussion that we had on that item. All right, let's move to item 5. Item 5 is an informational update on the Orange Line Improvement Project. Heather Furey is going to begin this presentation.
Good morning. I'm joined by David Holman from TY Lin, who's our program management consultant on the Orange Line project. And I'll turn it over to him and we'll get started.
Good morning. Hello, my name is David Holman. I'm the project manager for the PMC team. I'm with TY Lin. Today, we're going to be giving you an update on the Orange Line project with a general project summary and overview of the current schedule. We're giving you some updates on the phase 1 and 2 activities. We'll be reviewing some of the funding and some other work that's taking place along the Orange Line. We'll also give you an update on some state agency coordination, the risk management, and some next steps as we move forward. So the Orange Line project consists of 17.6 miles of improvements through the cities of San Diego, Lemon Grove, La Mesa, and El Cajon. And these improvements will include upgrades to the track, signals, at-grade, and pedestrian crossings. The project will improve service reliability, replace aging infrastructure, and enhance safety improvements. The construction began last year and will continue through 2028. And the project will be built in 2 phases, as you can see here on the map. Phase 1 is indicated with the yellow highlighted limits, and phase 2 is indicated with the red highlighted limits. This slide presents the overall schedule for both phases. You can see for phase 1, we are still receiving long lead procurement items being delivered, and we are well into construction for phase 1. It will continue through 2027 when we have closeout. For phase 2, we are also working on some long lead procurement items. They've all been purchased, and so now we're in the process of receiving deliveries. We are also wrapping up the pre-construction services and getting ready to start construction later this year, which will continue through closeout in 2029. And this graphic represents the progress of construction on phase 1. And you can see we've reached the 50% mark. So for the phase 1 construction update in detail, the project is on schedule and we have reached 353 days into the contract. There is one amendment in progress that includes several change orders totaling $292,000, or less than 1% of the contract value. The construction is approximately 46% complete, and the contractors received 42% of their payments. They've also completed over 50% of their submittals, and we have received nearly 90% of the owner-furnished equipment. Phase 1 will be constructed in 4 segments. This map illustrates the limits of those segments and the activities that are currently taking place. You can see for segment 1, it's complete and in use. And with segment 2, we're working on some signaling and communication improvements with a scheduled cutover to take place this weekend. And once that cutover is in place, we may begin operating service. For segment 3, they're working on some civil, OCS, and signaling and communications improvements, and work in segment 4 will begin in June. Here are some photos of some recent construction activities that took place in segment 1. We have a cutover that took place during absolute work window number 4, and this is showing some conduit being installed. And we have some more photos of the segment 1 cutover where they are installing some insulated joints. And this photo shows a track crossover where they're preparing for the track placement for absolute work window number 5. And then here's the photos of the track being put into place and welded. So as I mentioned, we are approximately 50% complete with the phase 1. And of the 11 weekend closures we had scheduled, we have completed 5. The 6th weekend closure is scheduled for this weekend, and the 7th is scheduled for later this month. And following those 2, we'll have 4 more to complete the work on phase 1. So with the weekend closures, 5 of 11 have been complete. These will also include the absolute work windows. And during these closures, MTS provides bus shuttles around the impacted areas to maintain service. The bus shuttles that take place are dedicated to the Orange Line work and do not impact regularly scheduled bus service or routes. However, we did receive a few complaints in some recent work windows. So to address this, we have increased our advance notice at stations and notifying the riders of upcoming work so they can plan accordingly. As I mentioned, we have absolute work window number 6, which will include a weekend closure this weekend for the segment 2 cutover. Following the segment 2 cutover and testing this weekend, segment 2 will begin regular operating service. Then we have another weekend closure coming up at the end of the month. So continuing into the communication efforts, we are providing advance notice of these weekend closures at least 1 month in advance. The A-frames are placed at the impacted stations and messages are put on the VMS signs. We also send out email and text notifications to subscribers and post things on social media. And here are a few examples of those postings. There's also a project dedicated website page on MTS's homepage, which keeps the latest information and is updated with upcoming closures. And then we're also developing a highlight reel of some recent work video that will be able to be posted on that website for viewing soon. We're also tracking and reporting the labor. So to date, phase 1 is currently meeting MTS's 40% local worker goal. You can see through March, the project has supported over 20,000 labor hours, which is equivalent to 519 weeks of full-time employment. This map represents the 21 zip codes within San Diego County where these local workers live. Moving into phase 2, this graph, you can see phase 2 construction has not started, but as we get started later this year, we'll begin to update this as we move forward. For the phase 2, we have been working on owner furnished equipment. As you can see from this table, all of it has been purchased and a lot of it has been delivered and is on hand. We are expecting a few more deliveries later this year. And to date, we've received approximately 40% of all the owner furnished equipment for phase 2. And here's a photo of some of the special track that was delivered in January and is currently being stored and ready for use for the phase 2 construction. The phase 2 issued for bid procurement was released in January. We held a pre-bid site meeting walk with the contractors also in January. And in March, the bids were received. 3 bids were received. And we are scheduled to go to the board in June for the contract award approval. Phase 2 will be constructed in 8 segments shown here on the map with the different colors. I want to point out, you can see segment 1 will start at the El Cajon station and work south along the Orange Line to complete construction in segment 8 at the Massachusetts Avenue station. Moving into some project funding summaries. The project is funded through a combination of TIRCP, SB 125, and MTS CIP local funds. This table provides a breakdown of those funding types and sources combined for both phases. You can see the total estimated project budget for phases 1 and 2 is $151.2 million. Breaking the funding down a little bit further, these pie charts show the funding allocations by phase. You see the phase 1 includes TIRCP, SB 125, and CIP local funds for a total of $55.3 million. And phase 2 includes TIRCP and CIP funds for a total of $95.9 million. I want to point out, you can see the project is largely funded through state grants. For the phase 1 funding and expenses to date, we've spent 46% of the budget across the various funding types. And you can see the bar charts shows the funding allocations by those different types. And this reporting is through March. Phase 2, we are through March, about 8% has been spent. And this has all been from CIP local funds used to procure the owner furnished materials that we're storing on hand. And the TIRCP funding is reserved for construction, and we won't begin spending that until following the contract award later in June. We're also tracking the percentage of the project within these local communities. You can see that phase one is entirely within the city of San Diego, but phase two is largely within the city of La Mesa, El Cajon, and Lemon Grove. You can also, this chart shows the cost of the work within these local cities, but it also very closely relates to the linear footage of track serving these communities. So during the weekend closures and absolute work windows, MTS is taking advantage of the weekend closures to perform additional work along the orange line. This general work includes maintenance of way and track maintenance projects. We've also removed and replaced the siding at 5 locations along Commercial Street. And the grade crossing replacements have been completed for 3 locations. And here are some photos of some of this work. This is a good representation of how MTS is working to minimize the impacts to the community by taking advantage of these weekend closures. We're also coordinating with the state agency, the California Public Utilities Commission, the CPUC, which regulates rail safety throughout the state of California. For phase one, the segment one cutover was completed in February when they conducted their testing and verification, and the safety certification is now complete. As I mentioned, the segment two cutover will be scheduled for this weekend. So they were out last weekend to conduct their field investigation and will be supporting the cutover this weekend. So their safety certification for segment two is currently in progress. When we move to phase two, we have been coordinating the review and approval of improvements at 7 existing grade crossings at 2 stations. And we're currently working on the GO88 applications. We're also managing the risks for the project. This chart shows the risk profile for all 77 risks identified to date. You can see the majority of the risks have been managed to score in the low to medium range, with only 5 risks scoring high to very high. There are no significant risks and 21 risks have been closed. We will continue to perform our monthly risk updates and hold our quarterly workshops as we maintain and manage these risks. And this slide provides a summary of the top risks that we're currently tracking. These higher scoring risks are closely related to the phase 2 construction contract and schedule. As the phase 2 contract approaches approval next month and phase 2 construction begins this summer, we'll be closely monitoring these risks and actions. As you can see, the Orange Line project continues to move forward. The phase 1 construction is on schedule, and phase 2 construction procurement will be completed next month. We'll continue to support the outreach and communication to the riders in the communities, managing the funding expenses and taking full advantage of weekend closures to perform other work along the Orange Line. That's all we have for our update today. Let us know if you have any questions.
I just wanted to add that Gordon in the budget discussion said he's going to be bringing back a proposal to add flaggers for more full-time equivalent positions here at MTS. And that is just directly related to all this work that you're seeing, since you need to have the flaggers in line in order to get the right-of-way work that you're doing.
Yeah, and I'll expand on that too, is we will have some work overlap between phases 1 and 2. So we'll need up to multiple flagging crews to support the work concurrently at the same time. You can see there's a little overlap around 26, 27. So that's why there's more flaggers needed.
Very good. Thank you for that. Thank you for the update on the progress here and what we could expect coming up, and particularly for keeping our riders informed of the status of things. Clerk, do we have any public comment on this item?
No public comments, Chair.
Okay, we will begin our board conversation with Vice Chair Goebel.
Thank you, Chair. This is a financing question on these big projects. We pay a lot of sales tax on a lot of this equipment and stuff. Is that right?
Yes, we do.
And I think I know what the answer is. I'm going to hate it, but who gets the sales tax? Is it because we're located in the city of San Diego that my colleagues here are enjoying the benefit of that, or does it go to the cities in which the work is done? Please tell
It-
me it goes to the cities in which it's done.
So it depends on where the equipment is shipped, is my understanding. I'm looking at the CEO for concurrence.
El Cajon would be glad to receive all of your shipments. We have a big parking lot out there in front of the transit station, whatever we can do to help.
Very good. I can tell you for phase one, we ended up changing the shipping address for some equipment from MTS to ship it to the signal house manufacturer because we're providing that equipment to the manufacturer for installation and what they were building. But primarily it's all been delivered to MTS here.
Thank you, Vice Chair Goebel. Seeing no further board discussion, that was an informational item. No motion is necessary. Thank you again for the presentation and update. All right, item 6 is a review of next week's board agenda. Any questions on the draft agenda?
And I just was gonna, we have a couple of changes to consent calendar, so I just was gonna highlight those. One thing that's not listed, but that we intend to add is just pursuant to SB 707, agencies by July 1 need to have an IT disruption policy on what happens if your IT system goes out during a public meeting. So we'll just be putting a policy that's consistent with the requirements of that statute on the board. We also had listed in the discussion section, but I was proposing that we move to consent some modifications to some various of our enforcement ordinances that went to the Public Security Committee in April, were unanimously recommended. They're not significant material changes. And so I was just proposing for the sake of time that be put on consent. And then we do have a matter that we're discussing in closed session, and subject to approval of the EC after that closed session, then that fiber easement agreement would go on the open session consent agenda. Very
good. Since that public security item was unanimously approved by the Public Security Committee, if there's no objection, yes, I think we could put it on consent. And if anybody wants to pull it from consent, they certainly can at next week's board meeting. Do we have any staff or committee member communications? Seeing none, we have one closed session item this morning. It is a conference with real property negotiators regarding a fiber optic cable easement. Clerk, do we have any public comment on the closed session item?
No public comments, Chair.
All right. The Executive Committee's next meeting date will be June 11th at 9 o'clock in the morning. We will now move into closed session. Thank you.
Reporting out of closed session, agenda item number 7, closed session conference with real property negotiators pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.8 regarding a 13.23 mile fiber optic cable easement. The Executive Committee received a report and gave instructions to negotiators.
Meeting has adjourned at 11:10 a.m.